LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the April 15th, 5th anniversary edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I started the first LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup 5 years and 1 day ago today on Sunday, April 14th, 2013. And like every Sunday since then, I've picked out the weekend's best, most newsworthy, informative clips for what should be a really educational, fair use media criticism and political analysis show for you all tonight. The political comedy sources will be both from Saturday Night Live, where Ben Stiller and Robert De Niro did the cold open, playing Michael Cohen, the attorney for Ben Stiller played Michael Cohen, the personal attorney for Donald Trump, and then Robert De Niro was Robert Mueller, and that'll be the first clip I show you. Then I'll also have some weekend update jokes and some jokes from Bill Maher's monologue last Friday on Real Time with Bill Maher. Somewhere amongst the clips, I think I may play you like the first 90 seconds of the very first LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup, which was like I said, 5 years and 1 day ago. I think I might do it between the news summaries and the newsmaker clips. But as usual, most of my clips come from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. You can see the topic I'm covering listed down in the video description. I've also put a link down there to this clip list of my 13 clips I'm using, so you can follow along and try to understand my notes. I noticed that the stream was a little messed up right at the beginning, but it looks like the stream is good now. I hope everybody got to hear everything I said there. And like I said, I'm going to start with 2 minutes from the cold open. This is Ben Stiller and Robert De Niro. Well, first it's Ben Stiller as Michael Cohen, Trump's personal attorney, talking to Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, and Mike Pence, the Vice President. But then it moves over to the Robert De Niro. I have two clips edited together for 2 minutes from the cold open. You can see the whole video for free on YouTube at a link I put down in the video description. Here's the 2 minutes I wanted to show you, the best 2 minutes I think, over here.
That's right. It's Michael Cohen, attorney at law, and also sometimes not at law.
Mr. Cohen, this situation is out of hand.
I know. Can you believe what they're doing to poor Mr. Trump? It's a disgrace. This whole raid was a complete violation of attorney criminal privilege.
Well, if you have nothing to hide, then you have nothing to worry about.
Is that a joke? Look, we got a real problem here, Jeff. You know how much evidence I have in my office? I'm Donald Trump's lawyer. I got a whole hard drive that's just labeled yikes.
Looking for something, Mr. Cohen?
Robert Mueller?
Why don't you have a seat, Mr. Cohen? Here, put these on. Have you ever used a lie detector before?
I feel like I have.
Great.
Look, I want you to know I will gladly go to jail to protect Mr. President Trump.
Just relax, Mr. Cohen. If you're innocent, you have nothing to worry about. I'll start with some easy ones. How'd you like that pee-pee tape?
What?
I'm kidding. Relax. We'll get to that later. Is your name Michael Cohen?
Yes.
And you're a lawyer?
Ish.
Did you make a payment of $130,000 to Stormy Daniels?
Yes.
And did President Trump know about it?
No.
I think you're lying.
It was supposed to be a surprise for Stormy, like a gift.
A gift?
Yeah, a gift. Like a rock you throw through a window with a note tied to it that says, "Stop talking."
So that was a good joke there I ended with, and there were multiple good jokes in the Ben Stiller, I guess they souped up the writing for Robert De Niro and Ben Stiller there. No Alec Baldwin, but I enjoy that. I like the lawyer-ish and the attorney criminal privilege, and of course that last joke there. But it's a present, like the rock you throw through someone's window. So that was really good writing. That was of the three political comedy clips I'm showing. I think that was the best one. But I think Bill Maher actually had 3 good jokes all put together. First, you'll see this. This is like the first 2 minutes, or no, first 1 minute, 55 first 55 seconds from Bill Maher's monologue last Friday. Also on this topic, the same topic of all the things that happened this week. I think actually Bill Maher may have one of the most extensive summaries of all the news. He's the only one who mentioned that Tom Bossert, who I played a clip from last week, who used to be White House Homeland Security Advisor, he was like out this week for no reason that I can figure out, except that he apparently clashed with the new National Security Advisor, John Bolton. So, and Mr. Mustache, if you know who I'm talking about. But here is 55 seconds of Bill Maher. He starts off with a good joke about it, that it's the obvious joke. Not much happened this week, and then puts together 2 good punchlines in a row. These are basically the best jokes. This first 55 seconds, the best jokes of about 8 minutes of monologue, which I can't say is all of this high quality, but I will discuss these jokes with you after we watch them together over here.
Well, look, I hate to disappoint you, but not much happened this week. All right, let's go over what happened. The offices of Trump's personal lawyer were raided. He had a meltdown over Jim Comey's book. The Homeland Security Advisor quit. The Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, out. And we're attacking Russia in Syria as we speak right now. So things are really quieting down. No, it looked like Trump was backing off his threat to attack Syria, but apparently he got the go-ahead from Fox and Friends today. So, I don't want to say this raid is meant to distract from his other problems, but it's called Operation Desert Stormy.
So there you go. 2 good punchlines in a row at the end. Both that Trump got the go-ahead from Fox and Friends to bomb Syria, and he named it Operation Desert Stormy to distract from the obvious. And I'm actually going to have a clip later from Stormy Daniels' attorney, Michael Avenatti, talking about how Stormy Daniels is going to be in court with Michael Cohen tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. That should be quite a show, and I'm going to be talking quite a bit about the Michael Cohen possible collusion angle, or there was actually a good article in the New Yorker how this could be the beginning of the end of the Trump presidency, since they raided Michael Cohen, the offices of Michael Cohen, the Trump's personal attorney, and that was also the subject of some jokes I didn't think were quite as good over on Weekend Update. This is the final political comedy clip. First, some jokes from the beginning of the monologue, or not the monologue, the Weekend Update news reporting from Colin, Jost, and Michael Che about Michael Cohen, and then some James Comey jokes from the end of this 3-minute or so video that you can get for free on YouTube, on the Saturday Night Live channel that is on YouTube. This is the best 2 minutes from those 3 minutes over here.
Well, Donald Trump has had a really, really tough week, but you know what? I think I'm still going to make fun of him. The FBI raided the home, office, and hotel room of President Trump's personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, this week. Authorities first became suspicious of Cohen when they found out he was the lawyer for Donald Trump. This does not look good for Trump. If being black has taught me anything, is that when the feds come kicking in your door, they got something. FBI raids are like when your girl goes through your phone. She's only doing it to confirm whatever she already knows.
And the Michael Cohen raid is being called historic. It's amazing how we keep hearing historic in reference to things that are happening during Trump's administration, and none of them are positive. Historic has become a polite way of saying unbelievably terrible. Like, wow, the Cleveland Browns are having another historic season. In his memoir, A Higher Loyalty, James Comey calls President Trump ego-driven and said that he is untethered to truth. The book was co-authored by Captain Obvious. President Trump responded to the claims in Comey's new memoir, calling him a leaker and a liar, which coincidentally is also the name of the video the Russians have.
According to James Comey's new memoir, President Trump denied allegations in the Russian dossier, saying, "I'm a germaphobe. There's no way I would let people pee on each other around me." First of all, you can't call yourself a germaphobe when you're out there raw dogging porn stars. Also, paying hookers to pee on each other while you hang back and watch is exactly something a germaphobe would do. Sidebar, am I the only one that thinks the president being into pee-pee is, I don't know, kind of charming? Yeah? I mean, it's humanizing. Like, remember when we saw that video of Obama playing basketball and we were like, oh, wow, he's just like us. This is the same thing, but like times 2.
Times 2.
I don't know. None of those jokes were all that great, though, but those were the best 2 minutes. I mean, I don't know, were any of those jokes as good as the ones from Bill Maher? You can let me know what you think in the comment section. But that's the political comedy I wanted to start you with. I almost showed this clip that I didn't take of UN Ambassador Nikki Haley talking about Syria, where she had this Freudian slip where she said Russia when she meant to say Syria, but I don't know. Didn't seem worth taking, but I am going to show you 3 news summaries. They all briefly mention Syria, but they also focus on some of the other big news of the week. You know, Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House, saying he's not going to return. You heard Bill Maher sort of list all the big stories, pretty much, including Paul Ryan and, like I said, Tom Bossert, the Homeland Security Advisor for the White House, leaving. That isn't, I don't think, mentioned in any of these news summaries, but they sort of talk about Syria, they talk about Michael Cohen, they talk about James Comey, and I think NBC, as usual, does the best job. It's also the longest of the 3 that did news summaries. Fox News Sunday and CBS's Face the Nation really only did a news summary on Syria, which I'm not going to cover very much, except to the extent that you'll see it in the news summaries from NBC, ABC, and CNN, the 3 news summaries I'm about to show you. Starting with the best one from NBC's Meet the Press, pretty much explaining Trump's big week again. And some of the details that I want to discuss with you are only in this NBC Meet the Press news summary. So I will discuss it with you after we watch it together over here.
Good Sunday morning. This is one of those times when we'd really like to look into the future and see how historians judge this week. The fired FBI Director James Comey's new book attacks the president as, quote, untethered to truth and institutional values. The Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, decides to retire rather than face a possible future in the minority. The U.S. and its allies launch limited airstrikes on Syria in retaliation for President Assad's use of chemical weapons. The FBI raids the offices of President Trump's personal attorney, Michael Cohen, suggesting a new pathway for special counsel Robert Mueller. And in what may be a huge break in the Russian investigation, McClatchy reports that Mueller has evidence that Michael Cohen made a trip he's denied ever taking to Prague during the 2016 campaign. And if proven, that could be the evidence that leads to collusion. All this comes as our new NBC News Wall Street Journal poll shows President Trump's approval rating slipping a bit. 39% say they approve of the job the president is doing, while 57% disapprove. The approval number is actually down 4 points, and the disapproval number up 4 since last month. But interestingly enough, today's numbers are the exact set of numbers that our poll showed in January. It's more evidence that the president's approval numbers move up and down within a very narrow trading range. We're going to have more on our poll later on in the show, but we're going to begin with a week that started with a raid on the offices of the president's lawyer, and it ended with a military strike on Syria.
I ordered the United States Armed Forces to launch precision strikes.
On Friday night, the U.S. and European allies launched coordinated airstrikes on 3 of Assad's chemical weapons facilities after a suspected chemical attack last weekend. The president even ratcheted up his rhetoric.
We are prepared to sustain this response until the Syrian regime stops its use of prohibited chemical agents.
But the Pentagon quickly made it clear that the strikes were limited.
Right now, this is a one-time shot.
The airstrikes come as Mr. Trump is mired in multiple domestic political crises, and he and his surrogates are launching a campaign against law enforcement. Earlier on Friday, the president attacked fired FBI Director James Comey as an untruthful slimeball, and the name-calling kept on coming.
Comey will be forever known as a disgraced partisan hack.
A disgruntled ex-employee who, after the fact, wants to clear his conscience.
James Comey is a dirty cop.
The Republican National Committee even rolled out a website called Lion Comey, attempting to discredit Comey with talking points and digital ads. All this, a reaction to Comey's new book, a portrait of a president obsessed with disproving a dossier filled with salacious and unproven claims, and unconcerned with the Russian threat.
No one, to my recollection, asked, so what's coming next from the Russians? It was all, what can we say about what they did and how it affects the election that we just had?
Speaking of the dossier, McClatchy reports that Special Counsel Robert Mueller has evidence that Mr. Trump's personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, made a secret trip to Prague in the summer of 2016, a claim that was made in said dossier, which included a report that he met there with a Putin ally. In the past, Cohen has denied ever visiting Prague, and on Saturday he denied it again, calling the story bad reporting, bad information, and bad story. NBC News has not confirmed the report. On Monday, Cohen's office was raided by the FBI, a move that unnerved Mr. Trump, who has always considered an investigation into his personal business dealings a red line. Some Trump allies used the raid to argue that Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein should be fired.
Rod Rosenstein is so incompetent, compromised, and conflicted that he can no longer serve as the Deputy Attorney General.
And joining me now is...
So that was the NBC Meet the Press report. Both the introduction from Chuck Todd and then the pre-recorded package, I thought, gave a lot of good facts, especially about the Michael Cohen raid by the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. It wasn't even Robert Mueller, which is an issue I will get to when I show the Trey Gowdy clip from Fox News Sunday in a little bit. But the things that there were a couple minor issues or minor facts that were missing from there. You know, one thing I heard on MSNBC's AM Joy yesterday was that Michael Cohen is actually married to a Ukrainian woman, and that he was heavily involved in the attempt to get a Ukrainian-Russian peace plan where Russia would keep the Crimea, and he was also involved in the attempt to get Trump Tower in Moscow, and so there are a lot of possible money laundering and campaign finance. The whole thing about the Prague trip, they didn't really talk about how back in January 2017, Michael Cohen tweeted out a picture of his passport and said, you know, the whole claim that he was in Prague was not true, and he denied the whole thing. And it was actually one of the things that Donald Trump used at the beginning of his presidency to start using the term fake news, was this whole story about Michael Cohen going to Prague. But there's now a report from McClatchy that, you know, the whole passport issue is bogus because he went to Germany, and then you can go into Czechoslovakia, or the Czech Republic, and Prague without getting any stamp on your passport. So the whole passport issue is like a total distraction. And if he did go there, that's like another one of the possible vectors of collusion into the Trump campaign. A little later, I'll show an Adam Schiff clip where he talks about a couple of those other vectors, not even counting the new possible Michael Cohen collusion aspect. So for all the people who post in my comment section, you know, where's the evidence of collusion? Well, there's this new Michael Cohen possibility, and then I'll show Adam Schiff explaining a couple of the other obvious pieces of evidence of collusion, not necessarily beyond a reasonable doubt, but at least evidence. But before I get to those newsmaker clips, I did promise two more news summaries. The first one is from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. I think pretty much a shorter version with fewer details of all the same news. I'll show it to you, and I'll discuss it with you after we watch it together. You'll see that this includes, it's another extraordinary week for the Trump administration. Includes Syria, Michael Cohen, Paul Ryan, James Comey, and of course George Stephanopoulos had an interview with James Comey that I'll show a brief clip of a little later in conjunction with his interview on This Week with George Stephanopoulos this morning with White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders. But here's his news summary before that, just a little over a minute and 15 seconds over here.
Thanks for joining us this Sunday after another extraordinary week in this Trump presidency. It was capped by Friday night's strike on Syria. The U.S. joined by France and England retaliating for a chemical weapons attack by the Assad regime. UN Ambassador Nikki Haley reinforced the president's message yesterday, saying the U.S. is locked and loaded for a new strike if Assad uses poisonous gas again. On the investigative front, a strike deep into the president's inner circle with that FBI raid on the home, office, and hotel room of Trump's personal attorney, Michael Cohen. The FBI is looking for records about a payment Cohen made to the porn star who claimed she had a relationship with Trump, and the search warrant cites possible bank fraud, wire fraud, and campaign finance violations. In Congress, Speaker of the House Paul Ryan announced he will not run for re-election. The big question, is his retirement a big vote of no confidence in the GOP's ability to keep control of Congress? And, of course, that bombshell new book from FBI Director James Comey, A Higher Loyalty, doesn't even go on sale till Tuesday, but it's already topping the Amazon bestseller list, making big headlines with Comey's claim that the president is unethical, untethered to truth. My exclusive interview with Comey airs tonight on ABC. We're going to show more of it ahead. First, let's bring in our Washington team with the latest on this week's major story.
And I will show a brief clip of the George Stephanopoulos Comey interview in a little bit. I actually pre-ordered the James Comey book. It's supposed to be arriving at my house on Tuesday, so I can't really give you any analysis of that book. I guess it'll end up behind me here somewhere with these books. But there's a story about James Comey that nobody told that I think it might even be in this No Place to Hide book here. It goes back to the warrantless wiretapping from the George W. Bush administration that I will talk about when I get to some of the James Comey clips. But before I get there, I want to show one more news summary. This is CNN's State of the Union. Jake Tapper had his State of the Union this week at war, both abroad and at home, and talked about both the Syria strikes and the Michael Cohen raid by the FBI and the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York. And this is a little bit longer than the ABC summary. I think it's also a good summary of the news. This is the third and final news summary before I get to the newsmaker clips. And I'll talk about it with you after we watch it together over here.
Tapper in Washington, where the State of our Union is at war, abroad and at home. President Trump this morning waging rhetorical battle against former FBI Director James Comey, tweeting, quote, "Unbelievably, James Comey states that polls where Crooked Hillary was leading were a factor in the handling, stupidly, of the Clinton email probe. In other words, he was making decisions based on the fact that he thought she was going to win and he wanted a job. Slimeball," unquote. This is an apparent reference to a passage in the Comey book where the former FBI director wrote, quote, "It is entirely possible that because I was making decisions in an environment where Hillary Clinton was sure to be the next president, my concern about her making an illegitimate president by concealing the restarted investigation bore greater weight than it would have if the election appeared closer or if Donald Trump were ahead in all polls. But I don't know," unquote. Just another distraction for the president, who is also fuming over an FBI raid of his personal attorney Michael Cohen's office, and in the same week authorized more military strikes in Syria. Coalition missiles lighting up the skies late Friday night. New video showing the destruction. Military leaders in the United States say precision strikes hit the heart of Bashar al-Assad's chemical weapons program. After the attacks, President Trump declared on Twitter, "Mission accomplished." It's a term many in President George W. Bush's White House, including Ari Fleischer and Nicole Wallace, cringed when they saw, recalling the banner that hung prematurely in 2003 on the USS Abraham Lincoln, more than a decade before that war ended. This morning, President Trump defended the use of "mission accomplished," tweeting, "The Syrian raid was so perfectly carried out with such precision that the only way the fake news media could demean was by my use of the term mission accomplished. I knew they would seize on this, but felt it is such a great military term, it should be brought back. Use often," unquote. Joining me now is Independent Senator Angus King.
I actually don't have any clips of Maine Senator Angus King, but I forgot to mention that CNN State of the Union news summary included the mission accomplished tweet, which I think is definitely worth commenting on and noting. And then Donald Trump said, "Oh yeah, I meant to say mission accomplished. I'm bringing it back." And he's just a laugh a minute, isn't he? But I did promise before I started showing the clips that when I finished showing the news summaries that I might actually show the first 90 seconds of my LiberalViewer Sunday live clip roundup #1 from 5 years and 1 day ago. Before I do that, I want to thank all the Super Chat contributors already for this show. That's one of the things that's kept me going for 5 years. My patrons on Patreon, you can become a patron on Patreon at a link down in the video description, or these are the Super Chat contributors so far. $50 Swedish kroners, I don't know how much that is, but then there's like 3 contributions of $2 each, and then a $5 contribution, so YouTube takes about 30% of that. Patreon only takes about 11% of the patron contributions, so that's why I say that's a more efficient way to support my videos if you can afford to do that month to month. I also appreciate those of you who just give me the thumbs up, who give me the supportive comments. All those things keep me going for the 5 years. And okay, well, I'm going to show you the first 90 seconds of LiberalViewer Sunday live clip roundup #1. I don't know, is anyone even down in the comment section want to see it? Do you want to see it down there? I'm reading your live comments. Well, it'll be a 90-second interregnum between the news summaries and the newsmakers. And here it is. I was also wearing a red shirt. My production values were a lot lower. You can see it's the same bookshelf behind me, but only one book turned towards the camera. And, well, whatever. I've set it up enough. Here's the first 90 seconds of LiberalViewer Sunday live clip roundup #1, which, if you look, it's demonetized by YouTube, of course, because it references both Larry Flynt from Hustler and Osama bin Laden in the title. I don't know what I was thinking. That was back in the days when YouTube was not so persnickety about controversial topics. So LiberalViewer Sunday live clip roundup #1 is demonetized. Here's the first 90 seconds I ever live streamed as a Sunday live clip roundup. You can tell me what you think after we watch together here. So welcome. Thanks for joining me for the premiere of LiberalViewer Sunday live clip roundup, where I'll be talking to you, my viewers, live, then playing live some of my favorite clips from today's Sunday news analysis shows, and some similar shows from the last few days with clips that caught my eye, because, I often see clips I'd like to share with my viewers, but I don't end up finding the time or the material to make one of my edited and produced videos. So maybe this is a way that I'll be able to share those clips, and after I show the clips, I'll also look at the comments that you're posting in the comment section and hopefully get a little live interactive discussion going from those comments. But anyway, for tonight's premiere episode, I wanted to demonstrate how this show won't just be clips from the Sunday news analysis shows. I'll also be using interesting clips from some pop culture sources, and one show that qualifies is a really interesting show I've been watching on the FX network called Brand X with Russell Brand. I've really been surprised at how intelligent and insightful the British actor and comedian Russell Brand has been on some issues, and he's really brought some fresh perspectives to the talk show format, though he can also be too new age for me sometimes. But I thought he did a really good interview with Hustler publisher and porn king and free speech advocate Larry Flynt, and that included a clip of Larry Flynt. And then I go to the clip of Larry Flynt, which I'm not going to show you, but that is like the first minute and a half from 5 years, 1 day ago. I don't know. Have I changed that much? Has the show changed that much? It's pretty much the same introduction. It's, oh, I see I got a couple more Super Chat contributions while I was showing that. So thank you very much. And I hope I can, I don't know if I'm going to go for another 5 years, but I want to keep going through next year when there's a Democratic House and I can cover the impeachment and the Senate trial. I think it's getting more and more certain. And that's what I'm going to show you through these newsmaker clips that I'm going to finish up here. And I do have a bonus Sandy clip when Sandy came and lied down at the beginning of the 5-year anniversary show. I will show a bonus Sandy clip at the end. But first I want to show you several newsmaker clips also talking about the Michael Cohen raid and the Comey interview and how things are closing in on the Donald Trump presidency. First, here's Trey Gowdy, who you may remember being a total partisan going after Hillary Clinton on Benghazi for years, and it's like one of the biggest, longest investigations in congressional history, and it was all just to bring her numbers down just enough so that she would lose the Electoral College vote. No, of course, it wasn't that sinister a plot, but it was to bring her numbers down, and somebody admitted that. I can't remember exactly who that was, but I don't think it was Trey Gowdy. But here's Trey Gowdy now trying to sort of rehabilitate his reputation. I think he wants to be appointed as a judge, so he's trying to show that he's fair, and so he's actually defending the raid of Donald Trump's personal attorney, Michael Cohen's office. And there are a couple other interactions here that I thought were worth showing with Chris Wallace. You know, on Fox News Sunday, they spent the whole first half hour on Syria. This is in the second half hour when they finally started to talk about some of the things that maybe Donald Trump was trying to distract from with this attack on Syria. And so this is actually one of the longest clips tonight. It's 4 minutes, 40 seconds. It's the only Fox News Sunday clip. But it shows how a Republican who's leaving the Congress and trying to seem fair-minded is actually backing up the Mueller investigation. Although he does say one thing about how it's not in any way related to Russia because Mueller put it to the Southern District of New York, so it couldn't be related to anything Mueller's investigating, which sort of leaves out the whole Prague aspect, which I'm not sure is true, as I will discuss with you after we watch this 4-minute, 39-second clip from Fox News Sunday this morning together over here.
Normally, the decision to launch a military strike would fill the plate of any president. But this weekend, President Trump has plenty more to deal with. The criminal investigation of his personal lawyer, a special counsel continuing to breathe down his neck, and now a damaging book by the former head of the FBI. Joining me to discuss all this, South Carolina Congressman Trey Gowdy, chair of the House Oversight Committee and a member of the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, let's start with the FBI raid on the home, the hotel, and the offices of President Trump's personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, which raises obvious questions about possible violation of attorney-client privilege. As a former federal prosecutor, are you convinced that this raid was appropriate, or at least on its face not inappropriate?
Oh, well, here's what we know. We know a neutral, detached federal magistrate had to sign off on the search warrant. We know that it requires the highest levels of DOJ permission to seize attorney-client records. And by that, I mean the Attorney General or the Deputy Attorney General. And we also know it must have nothing to do with Bob Mueller's probe, either directly or indirectly, or he would not have referred it. What we don't know is what the basis of the probable cause was, what was searched, and what was seized. But so we know a little bit, we don't know a little bit. I think the most important thing we know is that a neutral, detached federal judge that has nothing to do with politics signed off on this warrant.
I want to pick up on one of your points, which is that you noted that Special Counsel Robert Mueller referred this to prosecutors in Manhattan, and here was the president's furious reaction to that, and it led to this exchange.
Why don't I just fire Mueller? Well, I think it's a disgrace what's going on. We'll see what happens, but I think it's really a sad situation when you look at what happened. And many people have said you should fire him.
Question, do you still think, we talked several weeks ago, do you still think it would be wrong, it would be a serious mistake to fire Mueller? And given the growing calls to fire the Deputy Attorney General, do you feel the same way about firing Rod Rosenstein?
Well, let me take Mueller first. I don't know what Mueller was supposed to do other than what he did. When a prosecutor comes in contact with information or evidence of a crime, what are you supposed to do other than to refer it to the appropriate jurisdiction? Now, if Mueller had kept something tangential or unrelated for himself, then I'd say, fine, you can criticize him. But he came in contact with potential criminality. He referred it to the U.S. Attorney's Office of Jurisdiction, and he did so with the permission of Rod Rosenstein. I don't know what else he could do. As for Rod Rosenstein, I don't see a basis for firing him in his handling of this probe. Now, he's the one who drafted that original jurisdiction for Mueller. So if you think it's too broad, you got to direct your criticism towards Rosenstein and not to Mueller. If you're upset with Rosenstein because he's slow-walking document production to Congress, take that up with him. But how this is Mueller's fault, it just defies logic to me, Chris.
Yeah, but here's the point. And Steve Bannon, the president's former and apparently exiled advisor, has suggested this. If you fire Rosenstein and you put a new guy in there as the Deputy Attorney General to oversee the Mueller investigation, then you don't have to fire Mueller, but you can restrict him. Are you concerned about that?
So this is the same Steve Bannon that accused the president's son of an act of treason, the same Steve Bannon that did something no one else in the world can do, which is elect a Democrat in Alabama. I don't know who the hell would take advice from Steve Bannon. And if I were the president, I'd say go get advice from anyone else in the world other than Steve Bannon.
But just to make it clear, while you rule out flatly the firing of Mueller, you're leaving the door open to firing Rosenstein.
It depends. It depends on, I mean, look, the president is the head of the executive branch. He doesn't have to run his hiring and firing decisions by us. So if he's upset with Rod Rosenstein because Rod Rosenstein is not producing documents to Congress, that's a legitimate thing to be upset about. If he's upset with Rod Rosenstein because he wants to get at Bob Mueller, and that's the way he's going to do it, taking the advice of Steve Bannon, which I would strongly recommend against, then no, I don't think that's appropriate. Does he have the power to get rid of Rod Rosenstein? Yes, he does. Do I think it's wise? I don't.
In the midst of all this.
Well, at least at the end there, he said he wasn't wise to get rid of Rod Rosenstein, although a couple times in there he seemed to be like sending a message to Donald Trump, if you want to get rid of Rod Rosenstein, don't do it because of his oversight of the Mueller investigation. Do it because you don't like the speed at which he's producing documents for the Congress. I think he said that like twice in that clip. And he also seemed to say that when Mueller referred this whole Michael Cohen investigation to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, that meant that there was absolutely no Russia aspect to it, which may or may not be true. And it's still possible that there's this Michael Cohen went to Prague and met with Russians aspect. That would be like a whole additional collusion vector, as I said at the beginning. And I'm going to show that Adam Schiff clip talking to George Stephanopoulos in a minute. But one of the more ridiculous things that happened with the James Comey book is that people in the Trump administration are starting to attack James Comey for the way he handed Donald Trump the election by reopening the Hillary Clinton email investigation 11 days before the election. I saw some people down in the comment section saying they've been watching my show for all 5 years. Well, that was like Trump makes a comeback. I believe is the name of my show when James Comey reopened the investigation. That was like the first time I actually thought that Donald Trump might have a chance of winning the election. And of course, James Comey said that the reason he did that is because he thought Hillary Clinton was going to win. That's the little excerpt of the George Stephanopoulos interview with James Comey that has been playing for the last couple days. If you're over on the East Coast, you have like 4 minutes. It's 6:56 p.m. here on the Pacific, in Pacific time zone. So if there's a 10 p.m. interview on ABC that you have like 4 minutes to watch or set to record. If you're on the East Coast, I have to wait like 3 hours to watch the whole thing. But there was one little clip of James Comey saying that maybe he was thinking Hillary Clinton was going to win, is why he reopened that investigation 11 days before the election. And I've cut that clip from This Week with George Stephanopoulos to a question that George Stephanopoulos asked White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and it's about James Comey and his honesty. And you'll see that partway through this, Sarah Huckabee Sanders actually attacks James Comey for handing the election to Donald Trump. I don't know if you just heard Sandy snoring. Sandy's right over there and snoring. So at least she's comfortable. I'm not so comfortable with the Trump administration attacking James Comey for handing them the election, but that's what happens, and you'll see it in this almost 4-minute clip. But like I said, I edited together the brief excerpt of the James Comey interview that is going to start in 3 minutes on the East Coast on ABC, and then Sarah Huckabee Sanders answering a question about James Comey where she attacks him for handing Trump the election over here.
At some level, wasn't the decision to reveal influenced by your assumption that Hillary Clinton was going to win, and you're concerned that she wins? This comes out several weeks later, and then that's taken by her opponents to sign that she's an illegitimate president.
It must have been. I don't remember consciously thinking about that, but it must have been. Because I was operating in a world where Hillary Clinton was going to beat Donald Trump. And so I'm sure that it was a factor. Like I said, I don't remember spelling it out, but it had to have been that she's going to be elected president. And if I hide this from the American people, she'll be illegitimate the moment she's elected, the moment this comes out.
As you were answering that question, the president just came out with his 5th tweet of the morning on James Comey. I'm sure your phone buzzed as you were talking as well. I want to dig into this just a little bit. When that tweet that John Carl cited right there, where he says Comey gave up classified information, jail. Why did he lie to Congress? Jail. What exactly is the president referring to there? And has he asked the Justice Department to investigate James Comey?
Look, it's been very clear that James Comey is a self-admitted leaker. He lied to Congress. He's been inconsistent.
What did he lie to Congress about?
Look, he said that he opened the Hillary Clinton investigation on its merits. Now we're finding out certainly that it had something to do with the political landscape. I find it outrageously unbelievable that Jim Comey, the man that takes these copious notes and recollects every detail of every conversation that he had, can't remember why he would have specifically opened an investigation into a presidential candidate, particularly somebody he thought would become the president.
He does remember. He goes into great detail
and he also, the clip you played just a few minutes ago says, I can't be sure. I'm sure that was part of it. I think I thought about it. I mean, give me a break. The guy knew exactly what he was doing. He thought Hillary Clinton would win, and he thought that this would give him some cover. He thought that he made these decisions based on the political landscape and not on the facts of the case. And when the person that is supposed to lead the highest law enforcement agency in our country starts making decisions based on political environments instead of on what is right and what is wrong, that's a really dangerous position. And I think that's one of the reasons there is such a huge bipartisan consensus that James Comey doesn't have credibility and shouldn't have been leading the FBI any longer.
Well, that's not exactly what he said. But is the president asking the Justice Department to investigate James Comey?
I'm not aware of a specific ask of the Justice Department, but I do think if they feel there was any wrongdoing, they should certainly look into that, just as they do on a number of other topics.
And are you sure you all want to be engaged in a credibility contest with James Comey? I think the White House has cited more than 2,000 instances where the president and the White House have made false statements. Our new poll shows that Americans, by a pretty wide margin, think that James Comey has more credibility than President Trump.
I have to disagree with your poll to a great deal. There's a daily Rasmussen poll that has the president up at about 50%, which is actually better than President Obama at this point. At the end of the day, this president will be judged on probably 2 big things: the economy and national security. 2 things we feel very confident this president has been a strong leader on, and certainly something that the American people are feeling the effects on when it comes to the economy, doing much better today than we have been in a long time.
The president also put out a tweet this morning saying he never asked James Comey for a loyalty pledge. Is he still willing to testify under oath that he didn't ask for that pledge and that he didn't say that he hoped Comey could let the Flynn investigation go?
The president has been clear. He's spoken about this a number of times, as you pointed out, including this morning, and he continues to maintain that, and I have no reason to believe anything different.
Of course, there's reporting that makes me believe something different. Apparently, negotiations have broken down. The raid of Michael Cohen's office has broken down negotiations between President Trump and Robert Mueller as to Trump testifying. Now Mueller can either go to court and get a subpoena requiring him to testify before the grand jury. And of course, Trump doesn't have to testify because he can take the Fifth Amendment, and say that he doesn't want to testify. The president has the right not to incriminate himself just like anyone else before the grand jury. But that would be pretty much unprecedented. Even Bill Clinton, who said he did not have sexual relations with that woman, Monica Lewinsky, and then did finally admit to the grand jury that he had a sexual relationship, and about his whether he lied in his previous testimony. It depends on what the definition of is, and somehow I don't think that Donald Trump is going to be as careful and word parsing a lawyer as President Bill Clinton was, although he'll probably be at least as much a big a liar as Bill Clinton was. But that's a whole other issue, and like I said before I showed that clip, it was like I think that what Sarah Huckabee Sanders did there, attacking James Comey for handing the election to Donald Trump by reopening the investigation into Hillary Clinton 11 days before the election and doing it for, thinking about politics. I mean, that is pretty much the definition of chutzpah. If you ask me, that's my opinion. It's not quite as grating hearing that same analysis, and I pretty much agree with the analysis of Tim Kaine, and then I'll show you Susan Collins, a moderate Republican, who actually adds another level to it, and then I'll finally tell this story that you may or may not know about James Comey back in the warrantless wiretapping days from the George W. Bush administration. But first, here is Tim Kaine reacting to that same clip of James Comey talking to Margaret Brennan on CBS's Face the Nation. Not, like I said, not quite as grating, because at least he is talking about James Comey taking the election from, he was Hillary Clinton's running mate, and so he has this more standing to complain about this than Sarah Huckabee Sanders, I think. You can let me know what you think as we watch that clip together over here.
I also want to ask you, because you were, of course, the running mate in the 2016 election on the Hillary Clinton ticket. You've harshly criticized former FBI Director James Comey for his decision to make it public that he was reopening that investigation into the Clinton emails. He spoke to ABC News about his justification for doing so, and I want to play that for you now.
Mm-hmm. I was operating in a world where Hillary Clinton was going to beat Donald Trump. And so I'm sure that it was a factor. Like I said, I don't remember spelling it out, but it had to have been that she's going to be elected president. And if I hide this from the American people, she'll be illegitimate the moment she's elected, the moment this comes out.
What do you make of that explanation?
Margaret, the FBI has two real clear rules. Don't talk about a pending investigation, and don't inject controversy right before an election. They followed those rules with respect to the ongoing investigation into Donald Trump at the time. They didn't follow the rules with respect to Hillary Clinton. There was a clear double standard. But look, I have so much on my plate to worry about today and tomorrow that I'm not spending time thinking about 2 years ago. I'm trying to get a president to follow the Constitution. I'm trying to make sure that if we are putting our military troops in harm's risk. I got a kid in the military, and Virginia is very, very connected to the military mission. There's got to be a strategy. Those are the things that I'm focused on.
Well, your voice and face are in some RNC ads with your criticism of the director. So I thought it was important to have you comment directly on that. You still stand by your criticism of him.
Jim Comey, in my way thinking, is a good man who made a very consequential blunder. Good people make mistakes all the time. It just so happened that the double standard blunder that he made had a huge consequence.
Senator, thank you very much. Mm-hmm. And we will be back in 1 minute to talk about.
So, I mean, I agree with what Senator Tim Kaine said there. Well, I don't know if James Comey's a good man, or, I mean, he's a good man for, I've spoken about this before, that coming from a background as a criminal defense attorney, a public defender, that I have a real skepticism when it comes to prosecutors and police officers. And as the director of the FBI and as a former assistant U.S. attorney, Jim Comey is a police officer, you know, a cop and a prosecutor. And I just, I mean, I'm not saying there aren't good cops and prosecutors out there, but I start with a heavy dose of skepticism for law enforcement because there are so many political compromises that you have to make, especially to get to such a high level. You have to be a really good politician to get to where James Comey got, which means that there's police officers engage in what's called testifying, and prosecutors do all sorts of political things that I could never do, and that make me skeptical. So it's not like I'm a big defender of James Comey, but I think that Tim Kaine didn't even go far enough in terms of his criticism from what James Comey did 11 days before the election to hand the election to Donald Trump. He forgot what he did like months before, which to her credit, Republican Senator Susan Collins of Maine did not forget, talking to George Stephanopoulos on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos this morning for an even greater criticism of James Comey that I also wanted to include for this is clip number 10 of 13, I guess, if you don't include the bonus clips. And I will talk about it with you and tell a bonus James Comey story from the George W. Bush warrantless wiretapping days after we watch Susan Collins add an extra layer of context from what Tim Kaine said over here.
On James Comey, last June when he was testifying, you called his testimony credible, candid, and thorough. Has anything since then changed your view of that?
His testimony was credible and candid, but one of the questions that I asked Mr. Comey, which he answered honestly, was whether or not he had leaked to anybody outside of the FBI the reports and notes that he took on his meetings with President Trump, and he had. He admitted to that, which was so you're saying he's a leaker but not a liar, right? Right, exactly. It's but what's disturbing about that is his leak of those documents violated the FBI's own guidelines, which he himself helped to write. So that's troubling to me. It's also, I would go back further than my friend the congressman did. And to me, the first misstep that James Comey made after a very distinguished career was not 11 days before the election. It was back in the summer of 2016. The press conference, in which he did something very unusual. As an investigator, he announced, and thus violated the Department of Justice's own guidelines, the decision not to indict Hillary Clinton, and then excoriated her for her handling of classified information. That's not an appropriate role for the FBI director. And it seems to me that, unfortunately, Mr. Comey stopped making investigative judgments and instead was making political assessments.
And you think that was clearly the mistake for him right there. On that leaking, though, you saw the president's tweet this morning. The president said that.
So kudos there to Republican Senator Susan Collins for adding that additional layer of context to how James Comey was not engaging in the best practices of a prosecutor when he not only when he reopened the investigation into Hillary Clinton 11 days before the election, but in that weird press conference he held, what was it, like June of 2016? I can't remember the exact month, but where he said, okay, I'm not going to prosecute Hillary Clinton, but she's very, very bad. She's a very bad person, and she did very bad things, and naughty, naughty Hillary Clinton. And that, prosecutors, they're supposed to, if they prosecute someone, they're supposed to hold a press conference and say, these are the bad things that person did. But if they don't prosecute someone, you're not supposed to hold a press conference and say, bad, 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 bad. That is like, what was that all about? And so, as a former criminal defense attorney, that was pretty obvious to me back at the time, and I'm glad to see moderate Republican Senator Susan Collins bring that up. But there's actually this extra story that makes me think of former FBI Director James Comey in even more complex terms. I don't know if probably some of you know it, but back in the George W. Bush administration, there was this warrantless wiretapping, the whole FISA thing now, where the FISA warrants are all controversial. Back in the George W. Bush administration, they weren't even getting warrants. This was something back in 2008. They authorized the warrantless wiretapping regime that George W. Bush had been engaging in through the FISA Amendments Act. I've talked about, President Obama, when he was a senator running for president, actually voted for that, and it's one of the reasons he was not the greatest candidate on civil liberties, but that's a big, long tangent I don't want to get into. But the point being that the whole idea from that James Comey is a flawed person who has sometimes stood up for what's right is also bolstered by the story from the George W. Bush administration, where they had before the FISA Amendments Act, they had the warrantless wiretapping regime that had to be reauthorized by the Attorney General. I think it was every 6 months. And at one point, John Ashcroft, the Attorney General at the time, was in the hospital for pancreatic surgery. And so it came to James Comey, who was Assistant Attorney General at the time, to reauthorize the warrantless wiretapping deal, and he wouldn't do it. And who was it? I think it was I can't even remember his name. The Bush White House counsel, and then later he became Attorney General, whatever, I can't remember his name, but they all went down to the hospital and they tried to get John Ashcroft to sign it after he, when he was sort of delirious from before surgery or something, and he wouldn't sign it. And so James Comey stood up to George W. Bush and the warrantless wiretapping, and they had to modify the program, or for at least I don't know. There's not really a happy ending, because we're all still being heavily surveilled by the deep state. And like I said, in 2008, they actually had the Congress vote to authorize the whole program that had been warrantless and unconstitutional, and I still think it's kind of unconstitutional. But anyway, that's the extra James Comey story I wanted to tell, and where he stood up to George W. Bush at, in the hospital room with John Ashcroft, and so he's done some good things, but he's still a cop, he's still a prosecutor, and I don't know, I'll wait and I'll read his book. Apparently it's about all of George W. Bush, Obama, and Trump, so that's something he tweeted in response to Trump earlier today. But I want to get to my last few clips here. This next one is the one I promised earlier of Democratic member of Congress Adam Schiff telling you about the evidence of collusion, and at the end he talks about how the House Intelligence Committee hasn't really been able to gather any information about whether Trump attorney Michael Cohen went to Prague. But even without that, there's still several points where there might be collusion, not necessarily beyond reasonable doubt, but certainly evidence of collusion. For all those people in my comment section who say, where's the evidence of collusion? Well, here's Adam Schiff also talking to George Stephanopoulos on ABC's This Week This Morning over here.
At that time as well. On the broader investigation, you also heard Sarah Sanders say that there's been absolutely no evidence of any kind of collusion that's come forward. In fact, the president's gone farther, said there is no collusion, and that's been concluded by the investigators. You're still investigating.
We're still investigating, and this is just simply not true. There have been, I think, any number of witnesses and evidence we have found on the issue of collusion. And the Trump Tower meeting itself, the promise of help by the Russian government, the acceptance of help by the Trump campaign, the secret conversations with George Papadopoulos, all of this is evidence of collusion. Now, it's a separate question whether it's proof beyond a reasonable doubt of a conspiracy to violate U.S. election laws or a conspiracy to defraud the United States. One thing I think was very telling about the last indictment, Bob Mueller's indictment of the Russians, it made no mention of the hacking and dumping operation. Now, why was that not included?
Why?
That indictment is coming, George. It's just a question of whether that indictment includes U.S. persons or not.
And do you credit at all this McClatchy report over the weekend that they say that Mueller has developed evidence that Michael Cohen was indeed in the Czech Republic?
I don't know the answer to that because like many of the witnesses we brought before our committee, the majority was unwilling to use subpoena power to test whether they were telling us the truth. So we asked the majority, let's subpoena his travel records, let's subpoena his credit card records, let's find out where he was in Europe when he says that he was in one place. Did he go because there were not necessarily passport records to Prague or somewhere else to have these meetings? The Republicans didn't want to know the answers and wouldn't subpoena those records. So at this point, we don't know the answer, and I hope that the special counsel can find out.
And finally, what is your overall assessment?
So collusion, is that evidence of collusion beyond a reasonable doubt? Not necessarily, but there's certainly a lot of evidence of collusion, and that doesn't even include the new Michael Cohen went to Prague evidence. And actually, this next clip talks a little bit about that, and also about how Michael Cohen last Friday might have been talking to someone who was linked to, I think it was a Russian oligarch. It might have been, what's his name, Oleg Deripaska. I can't even remember how you pronounce those names, but this is also the clip where Jake Tapper is talking to Michael Avenatti. This is Stormy Daniels' attorney, and he makes news saying that Stormy Daniels is going to appear in court tomorrow, Monday, at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, when they're arguing about whether Michael Cohen's seized documents under this warrant, whether it's a good warrant or not a good warrant. And here's Michael Avenatti talking about that. It's really worth watching the whole interview. At a link down in the video description, you'll see there's a leftover chyron about Lindsey Graham saying that Michael Cohen is an idiot if he recorded stuff. And I didn't include that clip, but you'll see it's like the leftover chyron at the beginning of this clip. And then the 3 minutes of this clip, I think, are more newsworthy. That's why I chose them, and I'll talk about them with you after we watch them together over here.
Earlier today on the show, Senator Angus King, independent of Maine, who's on the Senate Intelligence Committee, said that Cohen seems to keep cropping up, whether it's with the Stormy Daniels hush money payment or with the Russia investigation. Do you know of anything that might link the two, or anything that Michael Cohen might have done involving Russia?
Well, I'm not at liberty to get into a lot of those details, Jake, but suffice it to say as follows. On Friday, while we were all in court trying to deal with this TRO, and the judge was asking questions of his counsel, and the counsel unfortunately did not have answers to these simple questions. The judge wasn't happy about it. Michael Cohen was videotaped and photographed sitting with a number of men on the Upper East Side, I believe it was, and we believe that a number of those actually have ties, Russian ties, as crazy as that sounds. So this story just gets more strange and more strange by the day. You couldn't even make this up if you wanted to.
Can you shed any more light on what you just said? I mean, I saw a picture of one of the people he was sitting with, and he has ties to one particular Russian wealthy individual. What else are you talking about?
Well, again, I don't want to say too much this morning, but you can't make this stuff up. I mean, I don't understand what he's doing, what Michael Cohen's doing with each passing day. This is getting worse and worse for him, and it's going to get worse and worse for the president.
President Trump's lawyers and Cohen, as you noted, went to court on Friday to try to prevent any of the material seized by investigators from being read, claiming attorney-client privilege. The U.S. Attorney's Office responded by saying that Cohen has, quote, exceedingly few clients and a low volume of potentially privileged communications, unquote. You're a lawyer. Doesn't Michael Cohen have some sort of standing to make this claim of attorney-client privilege?
Well, he has standing to make the claim, but if it's shown that these communications were not in furtherance of providing true legal advice or true services as a lawyer, they're going to blow a hole through the privilege big enough to drive a Mack truck through, Jake. And the fact that he's been called to court at 2 o'clock on Monday is also a problem. You know, as I stated on Friday, right after the judge made that order, we could see Michael Cohen plead the Fifth Amendment in open court on Friday, depending on what questions are posed to him. I'm going to be there at 2 o'clock. I can announce that we got comfortable with a security plan last night for my client. She's going to attend at 2 o'clock on Monday. I think Monday afternoon could prove to be very interesting.
Stormy Daniels is going to be in court on Monday with Michael Cohen. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, she will attend at 2 o'clock in New York on Monday.
Is that intended in any way to provoke him, to get into his head?
No, not at all. It's intended to send the message that this is a very, very serious matter for her, and she wants to make sure that the American people know that she's behind efforts to bring to light as much information and documents as possible. She also wants to ensure that that she is heard and that she's represented at the hearing. It has nothing to do with getting in his head at all.
All right, Michael Avenatti, the attorney for Stephanie Clifford, a.k.a. Stormy Daniels. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thanks for having
me.
Appreciate it.
I don't know. I think it might have something to do with getting into Donald Trump's head. I'm not sure I believe Michael Avenatti at the end there, but you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. I am really interested to see what happens when Stormy Daniels and Michael Avenatti and Michael Cohen all show up in court together at 2 p.m. on Monday, Eastern time. So that's something to look forward to, in addition to all these additional Comey interviews that will be coming out. I don't think there are going to be any real unknown facts released by James Comey in his interviews, because it wouldn't be proper for him not to have given out those facts when he testified to Congress and already put them in his memos. And so I don't think that there are going to be any like big blockbusters coming out from James Comey. But who knows what's going to happen with Michael Cohen and Stormy Daniels. That could be, I don't know if there's going to be the Prague connection, what's going to end up with that, or who it was he was like smoking cigars with on the Upper East Side of New York that Michael Avenatti was talking about there. Was it someone who was connected to oligarch, what's his name, Oleg Deripaska or something like that? I can't, or maybe it's some other oligarch. I don't even know. There's so many Russian oligarchs and I can't pronounce any of their names. So you can let me know if you know who they are down in the comment section. And before I finish the show, there was one more clip I wanted to show of Speaker of the House Paul Ryan this week announced he is not running for re-election, which wasn't really a big surprise. There have been rumors for a long time, and he did one interview on NBC's Meet the Press, and I was a little disappointed that Chuck Todd was not more confrontational in the way he enabled the era of Trump and the divisiveness of Donald Trump. The closest he came to, he did first, I'm not showing the entire interview. You can see all of Meet the Press at a link down in the video description, but he did cross-examine him about how he didn't really accomplish entitlement reform, and he certainly wasn't a fiscal conservative in terms of the budget deficits that ballooned under his speakership. But I'm not going to show those clips. This is more about the divisiveness and how Trumpism isn't really what he supposedly stood for. And I don't really think Chuck Todd did a good job of raking him over the coals for the way he enabled Donald Trump and the nastiness of Donald Trump. But this is the best of it, a minute and 47 seconds from Meet the Press for the final clip before the bonus Sandy clip I promised, of course. But this is the last 2 minutes of news clips over here.
An old Jack Kemp guy that believes strongly in inclusive, aspirational politics based on bringing people together and not exploiting divisions. It's not the brand of politics that's being practiced today. And you know what's interesting? Yeah. You're leaving. I mentioned Bob Corker, Jeff Flake. These are three people. You guys all have the same tone.
Yeah, Jeff's a buddy of mine.
Okay, you guys all have the same tone when it comes to American politics.
Yeah.
You don't believe the other side is an enemy of the American people.
Yeah, I don't. And this is the one thing that I say when I speak to young groups all the time, do not fall for identity politics. That's what I always tell young people not to do. And here's the problem. Identity politics, I think, was a craft of the left for a while, you know, Alinsky. But
you
now
acknowledge.
now it's correct. Absolutely. It's now practiced on the right. So my concern going forward, if I have to be one of these people who are saying, here's my concern of our politics in the state of America today, we should stop playing identity politics.
James Comey, a man of integrity?
As far as I know, I don't know him very well. I've 2 or 3 briefings about what I had with James Comey, but
Would you take him at his word? Would you trust his judgment?
Look, I'm not going to try and help sell some books.
No, I understand that, but there's going to be a lot of questioning of his integrity and all this stuff. Is he somebody that you think is a slime ball?
I don't really. Well,
okay, I mean, that's what the president
I don't speak like that. I don't use words like that. I don't speak like that. By the way, I wouldn't do that because you're just going to help him sell books. So I've met him 2 or 3 times in 2 or 3 briefings. I don't really know the guy. I'm not trying to be evasive, but what I don't want to do is join some food fight, some book-selling food fight. I don't see any value in that.
Do you believe that if the Senate passes this bill to protect Mueller?
So he doesn't want to get in the food fight, and that's been pretty much his weakness, that I don't think he's really stood up to Donald Trump. And, you know, he's supposedly this, Boy Scout, as I think I saw someone say in the comment section. He's supposedly this pure, clean guy from Wisconsin, but he actually ended up being just like a tool of the rich and giving tax cuts to the rich, and he's like an Ayn Randian, excuse me. I think that he's gotten way too much credit from the establishment over the years, and don't let the door hit you in the butt on the way out there, Paul Ryan. That's all I can say. And I guess that's the end of the program. I did promise a bonus Sandy clip. This is when I got Sandy to lie down for the 5th anniversary program of Liberal Viewer Sunday live clip roundup. Here, the bonus Sandy clip, 12 seconds at the end here. Sandy, ready for the 5th anniversary show? Lie down. Lie down. So there you go, the bonus Sandy clip, and I appreciate all those super chat contributions. Here's the final list. So thanks for the people who support me during the show with super chat contributions, just the live comments, the recorded comments, the thumbs up down there. It's been 5 years. I try my best to pick out the best, most informative, most newsworthy clips from the big 5 corporate outlets, the corporate media here, and I hope you appreciate the work I've done. I'll continue doing it at least, well, like I said, through next year in the impeachment. That's my big goal. I want to cover the impeachment, maybe do some bonus coverage, when the House does the impeachment hearings and then the Senate does, whether, if you read the Constitution, you'll see it's going to take 67 senators to remove Donald Trump, which that's a lot. I guess maybe Republicans will join in to get us President Mike Pence. Well, whatever. That's all for next year, but thanks for those of you who joined me for the first time, those of you who've been watching for all 5 years or even 11 years since I started this channel back in July 2006. I guess it's 11 and a half years at this point, and until I have some reason to put up an edited, produced video, as I was talking about in my first Liberal Viewer Sunday Live clip roundup, or until next week, I guess I will be seeing all of you. Oh, and Sandy's getting upset for some reason. Yes, can I help you, Sandy? You have something you want to say? Sandy? Well, whatever. Until next week. Oh, you heard her shake her head there. Until next week, I guess I'll be seeing all of you around the internet.